I think that the business scene in Detroit is becoming a lot more interesting because it's starting to mature, I think. You're getting a lot more serious people entering the space, and they're really professional. They take it really seriously. They have like a real pursuit that they're, they have an idea of what they want to be. When I'm out in these places, I always enjoy seeing a creator's kind of vision come to fruition, where it's like, this is the feeling I wanted to evoke. These are the kind of experiences I wanted someone to have here. They're very curated.
And you guys are definitely part of that culture already, because obviously people, love the restaurant. You guys were elected in 2023 as the best Latin American restaurant in Metro Detroit, right?
I think stuff like that is I'm always really happy. I'm like, that's really cool. I want people to also, to be a place for those people, and like for them to form their own relationship with it and make their own thing out of it. And so, we've got, different awards and special recognitions and things like that over the years. But I've also gotten these reviews where people, are really personal, and that's what I wanted. I want someone else to, be able to call this place home, because, and like I said, form your own connection with it that has nothing to do with, with me or with my mom or any of our family too. That was all a big thing that I'm very grateful for having Culantro, because we were able to form our own communities, and I met other Peruvians and and other Latinos. Sometimes I think back and I realize I'm a lot of lives have been kind of affected by what we were doing over there.
And I remember I brought a client, real estate client. She flew in from Peru, and I brought her to the soft opening, and she was just amazed of how a Peruvian family was able to open up a restaurant in one of the best locations, and one of the best places to live in the States, So that it's very cool what you guys are doing. And I always tell when young people like us ask me because they have all the energy, como las ganas de empezar, to get started, but they're kind of hesitant and stuff. I always tell them you just gotta do it, man.
I think
you're gonna make mistakes regardless. I made tons of mistakes as an agent, as an investor, even as a social media influencer. But the only thing you can do is just keep going, man. You learn from your mistakes. That's the only way you can grow.
I think probably everybody that listens to you should listen to you, because that's how it is. You learn by doing, and that's pretty much it. You could read books about other people that have made that mistake, but it's just not, the lesson won't stick the way it does, when you make it. So I think it's just, something, I get people the same way, they ask me about different ideas they have and stuff like that. I'm like, you know what, at the end of the day, whether I think it's a good idea or not, it doesn't matter. It's just an opinion. I don't have any kind of authority on what works and what doesn't in this world or in this life. And so if I were to say it was a bad idea and you're I don't care, I'm gonna do it anyway, then do it. Go do it. I'd be happy to be proven wrong, or if I think it's a good idea, I want you to see, I want to see you succeed. At the end of the day, that's what I want. I want to live a good life, and I want everybody else to also. You want to see people going towards their most full potential. I think that's what life's about.
Bro, thank you for having us here at your place, bro.
Yeah,
appreciate it. You have a beautiful place, by the way, bro.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for. I'm happy you guys are stopping in. This is cool. Yeah,
bro. You've been here since in this place since what, 2 years ago?
I've been here a couple of years. Yeah, I think 3. Yeah, maybe 4. I don't.
But when did you first move to Detroit?
I moved to Detroit in 2014. I went to, I moved to Detroit to go to school. I was at Wayne State, and so I moved out of my house when I was 18, and I pretty much have lived in Detroit since then. Yeah.
Gotcha. And have you? I'm sure you've seen the growth, right, that Detroit has had. When you first moved to Detroit, what were your first impressions? Or you have any fun stories when you first moved into the city?
Yeah, I loved it. I was I don't know. I think I can think a little differently than other people. So I think I had my own friends who were like, oh, this is not, the kind of place I envision or whatever it is. But for me, I'm like, I have freedom, like I'm on my own. Like, I don't care how it is. But I did. So when I first like moved, when I got my first apartment, I remember I had a lot of friends who were telling me they're like, like Detroit's really growing, like we got this whole downtown, we got this, we got that, but my thing that I noticed was like almost a year, it was like 8 months into my lease, we got street lights, and I was like, oh dude, we have street, like that's what I noticed living here every day, like it's nice to, like go to Little Caesars. I mean, Little Caesars wasn't even like, it was just a project when I first moved in, like I didn't even, it wasn't even up yet. So it was things like that, like just quality of life. Yeah. Things that I noticed were starting to improve a lot, like in my first years out. So I would say those were, like just living here, like it was just quality of life stuff, like just places that made living in Detroit a better place.
Yeah. Do you see yourself living in the city, like still in the next, 5 years down the line? Like maybe you want to like get a family or something, or?
Yeah, I mean, I love Detroit, and I think that Detroit is a great place for someone to come of age. I think that that's something that, like in terms of family life, I don't know that it's really the best place for it. I think that's what I mean, it's just that's what the suburbs are for. Like you just have better, like quality schools and things like that. And there's and like I don't mind, like getting into altercations or something, kind of things that I don't even notice nowadays, like happen, but with a family, like I don't think that's the best thing to have nearby. So probably not forever, but I mean, like I love Detroit. I think everybody that lives in Detroit feels the same way that I do. So I think like I'm never gonna I don't know, I wouldn't stay forever, but like I'm also, like Detroit's always got a place in my heart, I think. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
What is your favorite thing to do? Like, let's say weekend, like, like going out, like what do you like to do, or what are your favorite spots here in the city?
Yeah. I think as far as one of the things that I really like about Detroit is just I always thought that there's a really like vibrant community, like people are really, like go after, like in many creative ways after their pursuits, and Detroit is pretty fertile for that, like compared to other cities in the United States is not as expensive. And so, like you used to see back in the 70s Soho was a place for artists up and coming, things like that, right? But like now people sell, like $20 million penthouses or something like that, and that's everything in a place like Tribeca or Soho. I think that kind of idea still exists in Detroit, and it's kind of on the upswing a little bit. Like I've met, and that's kind of what I always liked about it. Like I met a lot of really interesting people over the years, and like whether it was like chefs or painters or, or musicians or DJs, things like that. And that's the thing that has always kept it interesting for me. Like, I mean, I like to go out downtown, but also, like there are, like kind of crazy after hours and weird kind of events that happen. And I'm always curious to just be a fly on the wall in those kind of places. Yeah. Cause it's just like, I'm just like I feel like I'm a normal guy, and then I just kind of come across these scenes and I'm like, whoa, like I don't, I don't know where I just found myself in. Yeah. But and then besides that, just like normal stuff, just trying new restaurants, like I think that the business scene in Detroit is becoming a lot more interesting because it's starting to mature, I think. Like you're getting a lot more serious people entering the space, and they're really professional. They take it really seriously. They have like a real pursuit that they're, like they have an idea of what they want to be. And that's something that I always really enjoy seeing. And so I think that's something that is like still fun for me, like less so, like because I'm in the restaurant space, like I I go out with friends and do, like try the new restaurants and try the new bars and stuff like that. And I think for friends I hang out with sometimes, like for them, it's like, like I enjoy being here. But like for me, when I'm out in these places, I always enjoy seeing like, seeing, just a creator's kind of vision come to fruition where it's like, this is, like, this is what I want, this is what I wanted. This is the feeling I wanted to evoke. These are the kind of experiences I wanted someone to have here. Like they're very curated. And so I think that's really like, I think I always draw like a lot of inspiration from things like that. And that's something I really enjoy doing too.
Yeah. Speaking about, business and, like your restaurant, you and your family own a restaurant. It's called like, Culantro. It's a Peruvian restaurant. It's like my favorite one. That to be honest, not only because it's you, and it's a Peruvian restaurant. Like I've brought a lot of friends to the restaurant.
I appreciate it, bro.
Like in Culantro, and bro, everyone fucking loves, like the spot, the food, like the vibes and everything. Like tell me more how like that idea like come to fruition, how you guys made it happen, because I know it's not easy at all to, get a restaurant to be working and be profitable. I don't know if you know, but a lot of restaurants fail within the first like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, so I'll tell you the statistic. It is 90. It's close to like 95% of restaurants fail within their first 5 years.
Yeah.
So and that was like when I was first at Wayne State, I was pre-med. But it was not something. It was something that I was really doing to like appease and for my parents, but it wasn't.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but it wasn't something that I was actually interested in. Like I'm not, that wasn't what I had in my head, and so I remember I switched into business school, and then when I switched, that was day one, business 101. Like we talk about new businesses that people open up, and the thing that came up was like, restaurants are one of the most common businesses that people open up, and this is the failure rate. And so basically my professors there were trying to tell us, like, without the training you are going to put yourself in the position to receive here, like that could be you. So we're going to try to help you avoid that. But I think and
we just saw that, like, do you see it as a challenge? Like, were you like, no, like fuck this, like I'm gonna make sure it's gonna work?
No, that wasn't the case. And it was like in my own head, so it was like I told my mom that I wanted to, like switch into business school, and my idea of it, like I think I don't know when it was, but I started driving around. And for the first time, like, I kind of like my eyes were a little more open. And I'm like, oh, like this place is actually, like this place is a place that someone owns. This place is a place that someone built. This place, like all of this these aren't just things and places. These are like actually someone, like built this business and now reap the benefit of the success from it. And so I started kind of like that idea more, became more like present in my mind. And so I told my mom, I was like, like the only way to really make it in this country, I felt, was to own a business and to start a business. And so I told her, like, I was like, that's what I would like to do. But my idea was not to do my own thing. I wanted to, like, I thought it would be a good idea. I was like, what, like, I can work for a few years, save up some money, and like get into a franchise. So that way I won't have to spend my own, like I won't have to invent something or create something and see if it works, because there's a high risk, and I'm not always like the biggest risk taker. And so that was my idea. Like, I told her that, and then a few years down the line, like, she was like, like, I thought about what you said. She's like, I want to do this. And she told me she wanted to create a Peruvian restaurant. I was very unsupportive at first. Like, really? I want to be clear, I didn't think I was really, like, I can be very risk averse, and like, we've had this partnership over the years, and so like, so I'm happy that we've always like balanced each other out. Like, like, when I'm like really going after something, and like, maybe there's some traps along the way or whatever it is, like, she kind of reins me in, and vice versa. But I didn't really know much about how people would feel about, like, I didn't know what people would think about it, like, about Peruvian food. And so that was her idea. I was really unsure, like, like, I've grown up in Michigan most of my life, and there are not, I mean, the community of Latinos in Southeast Michigan is more homogenous. Like, most people are Mexican, and so there's not a lot of variety. Like, I was even in my own high school, like, I was one of like 5 Latinos in a school of like probably like around 2,000 people. Yeah. And one of the other ones was my sister, so like, so I didn't really feel this big, like, space in Michigan for more Latinos, or for more of this. I thought it was a big uphill battle, but she made it was it's funny, it's like people coming to Culantro now, and they're like, what do you like on the menu? And the dish that my mom, I was like, what are you thinking of putting on the menu? And so the dish she made for me was ají de gallina. And that's
what I always get, by the way.
It's my favorite dish. But that's the dish that sold me on the idea of Culantro. Like, that I was like, okay, like, what do you think is gonna, like, how can we bring people in through the doors? And that was one of the dishes she had from the beginning, and that was the one that sold me. And so I was like, you know what, like, I even then, like, I was interested then, like, in, like, business owners and founders and all of these kind of things. And I would listen to like a lot of podcasts, or, like, read books or about people who had started their own companies and, like, gone after, like, their own endeavors. And so that was always like a really big interest of mine. And then even then, like, I was going out to different restaurants and stuff like that. And so that was the dish that sold me on it. But I was still like, I mean, I think I was still nervous, like, I think she's really good at that, like, she can be overconfident, like, she can be boastful without anything. And then I was just at a young age, so I just wasn't that confident, really. And so I'm like, you know what, like, I like it, but I don't know how other people would like it. And so so she like showed me a couple of ideas. Like, I would bring some of the dishes out to my friends, and I was like, hey, what do you think of this? Like, and then when someone said, this is, oh, this is really good or something, I'd kind of let them in under the plan. And I'm like, look, like, we're thinking of opening up a place, like, and I'm like, what do you think? Like, would you go for this? Would you buy this? Would you pay for this? Yeah. And so so here and there, like, you get a little bit of encouragement along the way. And I had, like, a couple of my own close friends that were just, like, really supportive and just, like, positive people that kind of convinced me. They're like, no, bro, like, you gotta, like, you have to do this. Like, what you're doing, and it wasn't me, it was my mom. But yeah, but before that, my idea was to get into a franchise. Mm-hmm. But she had this idea of, like, of doing a Peruvian restaurant, and then I was like, yeah, like, and I don't know, I mean, after that, like I mean, we, like you kind of flip over and you're like, all right, I'm doing this, like no matter what it takes, no matter what it, and so, like those first few years, like we were just doing everything ourselves, learning along the way. We made a ton of mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
yeah.
Because as you know, like there aren't like any Peruvian restaurants here in Southeast Michigan. Not that I know.
No.
I think there might be one in Grand Rapids, but it's more like a fusion with Mexican food. But there's a fully Peruvian place here.
No.
And like that's the one thing that I miss the most, like from home. I was born and raised in Peru.
Yeah.
Same as your mom, and we always brag about like the quality of our food.
Yeah.
So when I see people there at the restaurant, like it kind of makes you feel like you're like kind of like back home, because you got the music playing, like the Peruvian music. You got the people like, so it's like I like it a lot. But let me ask you, how do you guys decide on the Ferndale? And the reason why I ask is because like when I first came to Michigan in 2018, like we used to visit my brother who was studying at Detroit Mercy, and it's in Detroit, right? So when we went to visit, like you would see like like the old buildings, and like it wasn't really nothing like really like it wasn't really colorful. It wasn't like popping. And then we go to Ferndale, and it was like the opposite. It was like more hip, more like a younger crowd. Like how do you guys decide? Let's do it first in Ferndale.
So that was that was something that was a bigger push from me. And I was the summer before, I was working in Ferndale. And so throughout Ferndale it was the first city in Michigan to do like gay pride, and like and they have like an Ethiopian restaurant. Like they have a lot of different cultures and stuff like that. Like it was, I think, for me personally, culture was really important to the city, because I'm like, most of Michigan, like we're in the Midwest, the general behavior of people is that, like you go out, like to a restaurant once a month or so, you take your family, and I mean, and people aren't always so experimental. So, so you go to the place that is good. And, and whether it's because, you don't have, I mean, some people, like, you can't afford to, like have some big experiment. And so, and which I'm mindful of that. And, but there are places where people lean a lot more into diversity. And, it's not just, like a big thing for me was like, I do not want to be that exotic restaurant that people experiment with once a month, and they're like, oh, that was good, but like I'm back to my meatloaf and like and whatever else. But I was working in Ferndale. Like I noticed that Ferndale, I felt, had a really strong like just like local community, just a local culture. People took a lot of pride in small businesses that were from Ferndale, for Ferndale, these different kinds of things, in a way that I felt, I've been living in Detroit for a while. I feel the same way about Detroit, but like the market isn't always as strong, because it's just, like Detroit is up and coming, which is a great thing to say, but but part of what goes hand in hand with up and coming is that it's not, there are times between, like it's feast or famine, like it's up and coming, as in it's getting more consistent, but that consistency isn't there. And when you're a new business, that's important, because like you can't live on, like maybe this will be a good year, maybe this will be, things like that. And so, the push towards diversity, and it's something that I saw in Ferndale that people really took pride in, was one of the things that I really liked about Ferndale. And so that was, so I made a big push, and I was like, what, like this is where we need to do it. People really embrace just diversity and, local things and different things. And people have, in this city, I mean, the city has a really, like you're saying, like strong community, like people are really mindful of, you know, like who their neighbors are and what's important to them, because they're my neighbor is important to me, and vice versa. And, you know, like when you need help, you know, like I will take care of you, because I would hope when I need help, you'll be there for me. And so I think it was just, for me, a big thing of it was the culture. And I thought that that was a really important thing, especially because, I mean, like you're saying, like we were the only Peruvian restaurant, you know, like it was just a very uncommon thing. I wanted a city that I felt had a face, and, you know, like, and had a like kind of zeitgeist that we can be a part of and really actually get involved in.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was a big thing for me, you know, like Ferndale. I felt like it had the right culture, and I thought it would be a good place for, I thought we would be able to succeed in Ferndale.
And you guys are definitely part of that culture already, because obviously people, you know, love the restaurant. You guys were elected in 2023 as the best Latin American restaurant in Metro Detroit, right?
Yeah, no, we've won like a couple of accolades over the years, and people, you know, like I think stuff like that is like, I'm always really happy, you know, like I'm like, that's really cool. But over the years, you know, like and I think that was something I told my mom in the beginning, that I was really focused on like what the business was and who it was for. And I'm like, look, like I know that people are going to eventually come to form a relationship with this place, and they're not going to know my name, and they're not going to know my mom's name, and they won't have any. And so I want people to also, you know, like this to be a place for those people, you know, and like for them to form their own relationship with it and make their own thing out of it. And so, you know, like we've got, you know, like different awards and special recognitions and things like that over the years. But like I've also gotten these reviews where people, you know, like are really personal, and you know, they you know, they're like, you know, like I just moved to Michigan, and, you know, and I haven't spoken, and this was actually a review I got one time. They're like, you know, like I haven't seen my family. It's been 5 years since, you know, like I tasted my grandma's cooking, or, you know, like, and it was and this, I remember the person, actually, she wasn't even Peruvian, she was just Latina, and she's like, I just felt like this connection with this, and it kind of was reminiscent of home, and, you know, like and stuff like that, like I think has always been the bigger deal to me, you know, like when I read things like that, and I'm like, you know what, like that's what I wanted. Like I want someone else to, you know, like be able to call this place home, because, and like I said, like form your own connection with it that has nothing to do with, you know, with me or with my mom or any of our family too. Because you know, like, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, like I want someone to get their own kind of value out of it, you know, like that is independent of, you know, like what I do, or, you know, like what any of us do.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, you know, the first place, you know, has been really successful. And then, you know, I'm sure you guys wanted another challenge. That's where you opened up the second place, which is also an amazing location, like in our Was that like more like was that something that came from you, that you wanted to go to that market, or family decision?
So it was so we all take a vote, I think, and the agreement is that like it has to be unanimous. My stepdad John, like, is very involved as well, and he's more like behind the scenes and stuff like that. But so between the three of us, like, we have made it that like we all have to. I think it's been a little unspoken, but like we all have to unanimously decide on it. So for a while, like I was pushing big for Detroit, but it was like a 2-1 split, you know, like my John was pushing a lot for Troy, 2-1 split. When we found Ferndale, I'd been spending a lot of time over there, and that was unanimous. Like it had what I liked, it had what all three of us liked. And then we found, you know, a location that we were you know, I mean, I think more so for my mom and a little bit for me, like coming to the States, we never imagined, like we'll be kind of, like right when, like the University of Michigan is a big deal in the United States. It's a big deal in Michigan.
It's one of the best universities in the whole country.
And so, like I don't know that we ever imagined that we could be a part of that. And so when I don't know that we could, it was, I think I felt like it was a little surreal. And so we went after it, and like we made it happen, like that had its own challenges and stuff like that. But the second time around, like I felt like I had a bit of a proven formula that I was okay with, like, all right, like the things we figured out the first time along the way, now I know. And so with experience, like you get a little better. But Ann Arbor kind of was just, I think just the ring it has, growing up in Michigan, was a big deal to us. And so that's a big part of what attracted us to to the city.
And I remember you guys had like a soft opening,
you and Carlos were there. Yeah, I was really glad,
people that know, like I met you through my brother, because my brother, he worked at Culantro first.
Carlos did work at Culantro. Yeah, he I remember he messaged me on Facebook, and he asked us, and we were looking for people, and I'm really glad, because we, I met you, Renzo, like our families became friends, and that was all like a big thing that I'm very grateful for having Culantro, because like we were able to form like our own communities, and I met, like other Peruvians and, and other Latinos and other just, like the who I was felt a lot bigger, in the sense that that I just, like I was meeting more people like me. And we met through Carlos, through Culantro, a lot, like sometimes I think back and I realize like a lot of lives have been kind of affected by what we were doing over there.
And I remember I brought a client, like a real estate client. She flew in from Peru, and I brought her to the soft opening, and she was just like amazed of how like a Peruvian family was able to open up a restaurant in like one of the best locations, and one of the best places to live in the States, So that I know it's very cool what you guys are doing. Are there plans to open up a third location sometime soon, or
it's you what I'll say it's been in talks, and you guys, I guess I'm putting it on a podcast, so hopefully mum's the word, but one of the things that I'm more interested in is adding adding like a cocktail aspect to Culantro, and us expanding, like one of our locations to be more of like a full-fledged just experience for people, like pisco sour, and like chicha morada, and like just more things, like I've always got cocktails, cocktail ideas that I'm trying to think of in my head. And so I think for me personally, if you ask me, I think that's our next direction. That's something that that I'd be excited for, we've had a lot of support in both communities, and so I think it would be well received. But that's, when it comes to next steps, that's for me what I have in my head. That's the way I see it.
Nice. No, something that I know people love to do in the United States is to have a nice cocktail with friends.
I think I think so. Who doesn't?
And you also like to travel a lot, right? You've been to a lot of countries. Like when you were like, how traveling around the world has helped you, kind of like grow up, or like be better at business, or like kind of get ideas from other places, like to your own restaurants. Like do you think that's important, like for someone that like a young entrepreneur that wants to like open up a business, to like kind of get out there and like travel, see other cultures, see how people like kind of do business in other areas, and just like take it all in?
Yeah, yeah, no, I think it's a massively important thing. I mean, like the best ideas I don't think are originals. Like you take an idea that's out there and you refine it and you keep on working on it, and that's when it becomes, like really the best, because the first iteration is not, I mean, is not the way. I mean, when the internet, like first came out or something, like that's not, I mean, what it was when it started versus what it means in our society today is completely different, because it's been refined and made better over the years. And so when I travel, and that's something that I like to do, because I just get these influences from other places, and I see the way other people do business, and like you said, like the I mean I even when I was building out Ann Arbor, like I have some tiles in my restaurant over there that I was traveling in Mexico for a while, and I had those tiles shipped from Mexico. Like I was just going into different shops and different kind of things, and I had those shipped from Mexico to Michigan, because I wanted, like those things. And so, like I'm always paying attention to, like the way, I mean, like decorations, like the way people do business, how services, how, like different cocktails, different dishes that, you do it this way, I do it that way, things like that. Yeah, I think that's kind of, like something that
You search for like inspiration, right? And then
yeah,
you kind of make it your way. You kind of
always, yeah, because I mean, I think I think it's a pretty universal or normal thing, that like you go somewhere, and you're like, how, like, and you have a great time there, and how can I bring back a piece of that home, because I want to have a good time when I'm home too. I want to enjoy, I want to build the life that I want and have the things that I want, like when I'm here, not just when I'm, like somewhere far away. And so yeah, so it's always, like something in the back of my mind that I'm like, how, this is how they did the lights, this is how they, like these are the kind of glasses they use, or the plating that they do, or the music that they play, or like this is how the seating is, like that's for me. I mean, I really pay attention to a lot of that, because it ultimately, all of those different factors, all of those different things, like come in to create the experience, and like that you have, and then eventually the way you feel about it, and after that it's the memory you have of it, and it's like, I'd go back because that's the way I felt, but yeah, no, it's always, like something that's going through my mind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%, bro. And then changing topics now, let's talk more about like real estate. I know you recently started investing too.
Yeah.
Like, how's it been? So, how's been your experience as a real estate investor?
Yeah, you know what? I think it was when as we were doing this stuff with Culantro, I realized like there was a lot of things like that like when I started getting more into real estate, I realized like, oh, like I've seen these kind of contracts before. I've seen these kind of deals. I know what goes into this and that. And so it was like it was like skills that I built up in this area that I realized like, oh, this also works over here, and it's not completely unfamiliar. So it's been similar to, like the experience, like at Culantro, like that, I mean, I always walk into other restaurants, for example, and like I become like a pretty good appraiser, I think. And I walk into a lot of places, and I'm like, I could pretty closely estimate, like what it took to create this.
Yeah.
And so, like that stuff is real estate, like, and is developing and stuff like that. So I'm just, like I've just kind of gotten my feet wet a little bit, and I'm just starting out, like I definitely have ideas of things I want to get into real estate wise further down the line. And but yeah, but I mean, I think it's an important thing to get involved in. People talk in the States, and especially I think as immigrants, a lot about generational wealth and things like this, and you know, of course not everybody has it, but this is but I think real estate is an important thing, and it's how you go on to create it, you know, because it's like, if I pay off this home, then I can pass it along to my children, and so on, and
pass it on to you.
Yeah, and you know, and so yeah, so it's something that I mean, I don't know as much as you do about it, but you know, I'm learning. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But do you mostly like your properties, are they like in the suburbs or are they in the city?
They're in the suburbs. I have one in Oak Park and I have one in Ferndale. And just because those are neighborhoods I know much better, and so
Oak Park's been getting really hot too. Another one that I like, as we've told before in the podcast, is Hazel Park, because you know,
I think Hazel Park is great.
Those two places are close to Ferndale. You know, because Ferndale's already like,
I think so.
Already, you know, established. You know, like, it's a strong community, and now like these other two communities, like Oak Park, Hazel Park, they want to kind of like, you know, copy, or like they want to create their own communities too,
which is great. Which is, you know, like, it's like, you know, you have these communities that get into these arms races, and it's like, you know what, like, because that's how Ferndale really started. They're like, you know, I want to be like Royal Oak, and because Royal Oak was like, look at Birmingham, I want to be like Birmingham. And then it just makes it good for everybody who lives in the area, because there's like, okay, now like there's a lot of places, and just, I mean, there's things that stimulate economies, you know, like local economies, you know, like, and so I see stuff like that, and I'm like, that's great, like that's awesome, you know.
Do you see yourself, because right now, you know, the properties you have are more like, you know, long-term investments, but do you see yourself down the line maybe investing in maybe like multi-families, or doing like a fix and flip, you know, like, are you like kind of like aware of like the different things that you can
the multi-family thing is something that I am interested. I am not really like a big like flipper and stuff like that. Like, that's not something like I do want to pass along value, I think, to like who I would be selling towards, and so most of mine I really see as long-term investments, and building equity is something that I think is important. Like, that's where I see a lot of the value. But yeah, and so, you know, like having like growing that portfolio, you know, and like right now they're, you know, houses, but you know, but if I could get into apartments, or even honestly, you know, like more exotic locations, you know, like I'd be pretty happy about that.
Sure. And you know, besides you know, your work at Culantro, and you know, your investments, I know that you also have a job too. Like, you do a lot of stuff, man. Like, I don't know how you do it, man. Like, because we only have 4 hours a day to do our things. But like, what it's like, what kind of job do you do? I think you work at the city, right? The city of
So I work for Wayne County. I'm a legislative director with a county commissioner. So it's a job that is like mostly involved in like public policy, and it's a public service job. And so we are generally advocating for the cities that we represent in our districts, and it's I tell people, because it's kind of like, it's not as exciting always to talk about, but I'm like, I tell people I work in politics, and everybody always gets kind of like a bad taste in their mouth and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, like, I'm not like, I'm like, I'm, you know, really what I do is, you know, like, we help advocate for the residents in our communities, which is what everybody does, you know, like, this is who we represent, and that's who I want to get more resources towards. And so, you know, like, we, you know, like, I mean, we're getting public, you know, like, federal dollars and public dollars, you know, like, for public projects, for parks, for community centers, for daycares, for, you know, things that just generally would make the quality of life better for the people that live in the places that we represent, you know.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome, man. And you know, like, I always tell, like, when you know, young people like us, like, ask me, like, because they have like all the energy, como las ganas de empezar, get started, but like they're like, you know, like, kind of like hesitant and stuff, I always tell them like you just gotta do it, man. Like
I think
you're gonna make mistakes regardless. Like I made tons of mistakes as an agent, as an investor, even as a social media influencer. But the only thing you can do is just keep going, man. Like you learn from your mistakes. That's the only way you can grow.
I think I mean I think probably everybody that listens to you like should listen to you, because that's how it is. Like you learn by doing, and that's pretty much it. Like I mean, you could read books about other people that have made that mistake, but it's just not, the lesson won't stick the way it does, like when you make it. So yeah, I think it's just, something, like I get people the same way, they ask me about like different ideas they have and stuff like that. I'm like, you know what, like at the end of the day, whether I think it's a good idea or not doesn't matter. It's just an opinion. Like I don't have any kind of authority on what works and what doesn't in this world or in this life. And so like, if I were to say it was a bad idea, and you're like, I mean, I don't care, I'm gonna do it anyway, then do it. Go do it. Like I'd be happy to be, like proven wrong. Or if I think it's a good idea, I want you to see, I want to see you succeed. Because I think at the end of the day, like that's, I don't know, like that's what I want. Like I want to live a good life, and I want everybody else to also, like, I mean, you want to see people going, like towards their, most full potential. I mean, I think that's what life's about. You have to create challenges for yourself and create goals and go after that.
Absolutely. And speaking about books, I recently made a post. I was recommending, a few books that I read, when I first started, as an entrepreneur, as an investor. Like, do you have any recommendations or any any book recommendations or podcasts that you listen to on the daily tool?
You know what? I'll give you one for each. There's a podcast that I really loved that I used to listen to when I was in college called How I Built This. And it's, I think it's an NPR podcast actually. And they interview founders of different companies, and they talk about how they built their company, like the trials and tribulations, stuff like that. And then the book I would recommend is pretty much the same thing. Like it's Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, who's the founder of Nike.
Shoe Dog.
Shoe Dog, yeah. And it's a New York Times bestseller. Like it did phenomenal when it came out. But personally, I think when I was in business school, one of our required readings was a book called How to Build Friends and Influence, which I think is a nice book. And it's like but it's
How to Win Friends and Influence People by
That's one of
the books that I read and I read.
Yeah, and I think it's a good book, but I also think it's like in 2025 it's just a little outdated in the sense that like a lot of people can kind of like figure these things out. I think Shoe Dog is for anybody that wants to go after their own pursuits. I think it's an incredible book. It's a memoir by Phil Knight about his journey to creating Nike. And so I mean, if I was, I don't know, if I was designing a curriculum, like I'd throw that in there 100%, because he talks, I mean, it's a company that everybody recognizes, and he talks about the times where it was not anything, where where he didn't know if it was going to work, where he really thought it was going to work, but it wasn't there. And even when he really thought it was going to, it wasn't that successful. Or, like he's talking about, like selling shoes out of the trunk of his car, like at high school track meets and stuff like that. And I think things like that are really important, especially for someone young and someone, who wants to do something. I think a perspective like that, from, like someone that so we can look at as just being at one of those peaks is important to understand that, you know what, like this, like everything else, you know, was built by someone, and this was the journey that it took to create it, and for them to find themselves, you know, like at that peak, you know.
And also like by like collaborating with other people too, because if I'm not mistaken, like, and Nike, like it was, you know, it was a company and it was mostly recognized as a track company, like for like athletes that ran track.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until they signed Michael Jordan when it just like actually like exploded, you know.
Yeah.
But it took them to believe in that one athlete. He was a rookie for
well, they had a bunch of different things. Like it was I mean, you know, like Phil Knight, like they were one of the first companies, like brand endorsement deals were not really a thing. They were in, you know, I mean, that was the 90s, and you know, like the brand endorsement deals weren't what they are today.
Mm-hmm.
And so they kind of, you know, like, I mean, Nike was a big company, you know, like back in, you know, like, and his book, for example, is like, he started Nike, you know, like in the 70s. And so that was, I mean, they grew a lot, but you know, then they make it again, you know, and then, you know, like they go after athletes, and they go after, and they become this symbol of victory, which is what Phil Knight, you know, like had in his mind in the beginning. And so, you know, so it's, I mean, there's a ton of things like that, you know, like where you just watch other businesses, and you know, and even the realm of, you know, like when you talk about, I think like especially apparel, and you know, like in sportswear companies, you know, like, I mean, now Nike was the biggest and baddest for a long time, and now it's not, you know, like now there are new companies, young companies, hungry companies, and younger competitors, small competitors, that I see as like really taking that space, you know, and like really capturing, you know, like hearts the way that Nike once did too, because there's always opportunity, and there's always, you know, like, and it's just back to that thing. It's just like you have to do it, you know. It's like
the opportunity is there. You just have to, you know, like
you have to you know, you have to figure out, you know, you have to be able to, you have to sell yourself before you can sell to anybody in the world, anyone else, you know, like you have to be able to convince yourself, because if you can't, then, you know, then nobody else is going to convince you, then you're not going to convince anybody else, you know. But
I think that's very true, especially as a real estate agent. Like I remember when I first started as a realtor,
I'm
like,
sure,
you know, like I look super young, you know.
Yeah.
And back then I didn't even have the mustache or the beard.
Dude, you know,
I look like a 12-year-old.
I wish, dude, you know, like I'm, you know, like I'm at this age and I still can't, you know. So,
yeah, so but that's very true.
Yeah.
Like you gotta have confidence in yourself, because if you don't portray that confidence, then your client or like whoever it is you're talking to, like they're not gonna feel that same energy. So it's gonna be harder to like close a sale or like make that relationship work.
Yeah.
Like you just gotta have confidence and, you know, like, you know, take action, you know, take massive action. So
yeah, because you know, I mean, it's even in your case, you know, there's a ton of real estate agents out there, you know, so you have to be, and they're gonna do the same output, you know, like their function is gonna be the same, and so you have to make this case of why you're different, and you know, like why you're because sometimes it's just, you know, it's like, you know what, like I like Renzo, and I like, you know, and I like the way he goes after things, and I like the way he makes this process a little easier for me to navigate, and that's important for a lot of people. And it's like, you know what, like the other guy didn't really care about, you know, like how I felt or my own,
so about the, you know, client experience, you know, with people to go to the restaurant, like they just want to have that good experience, and that's what makes them to like come back and buy a house from me again, or go to the restaurant again and spend, you know, money and, you know, like food and stuff. So it's all about like making the customer.
Because you can say whatever, you know, but at the end of the day, you know, like they're gonna have their own memory and of
how you made it feel, you know.
Exactly, you know, and so no, I mean, it's you have to find it, and I think that's why, books and podcasts and stories for me over the years have been so important, because I'm like, you know what, this is a time where this person who I look up to was not feeling confident themselves. I was just like, this feeling that, you don't know what to do, you don't know if you're the right person or whatever. These feelings of doubt are normal. Everybody goes through that. So it's like, that's okay to not have it right now. But like, it shouldn't let you, it shouldn't stop you in your tracks, because it's not, because if you stop, then you're not going to do it. And if you don't do it, then that's not a story. You're not going to do anything,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to, that's what, you gotta go after things in life,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bro, thank you so much for the conversation.
Yeah,
bro.
dude.
Definitely appreciate it. You enjoyed it?
I had a good time. Yeah. Hopefully you got some decent content.
For the people that wanna, check out like your restaurant, they wanna get a great taste of some Peruvian food. Where can they find Culantro?
You can come to my Ann Arbor location, which is our new one, is in downtown Ann Arbor, right on Main Street, and or you can come out to Ferndale, our original Culantro, and it's on Woodward, in downtown Ferndale. Come check us out.